The laughter was the part I'll never forget. The moment I pushed open those courtroom doors and stepped inside, my daughter Patricia and her husband Michael, both dressed as though they were attending a gala rather than a legal proceeding, actually laughed, not discreetly, not with any attempt at restraint. They laughed openly, the way children laugh at something they consider beneath them, nudging each other and exchanging glances as I made my way in with my worn handbag and practical shoes. Michael leaned sideways toward the man beside him, and I didn't need to hear the words to know what kind of joke he was making about the befuddled elderly woman who had apparently wandered in to defend herself without representation. If you're watching this, please subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're joining from. Your stories mean more than you know. To understand why that laughter mattered, you need to know what had led us there. 6 months before that courtroom morning, my husband Robert had passed away and left me everything. His complete fortune, every investment account, every property deed, every business holding. Patricia had spent years anticipating her inheritance. Millions of dollars she had already begun mentally spending. But Robert's will was unambiguous. His entire estate, valued at approximately $62 million, passed to his devoted wife, Dorothy Hamilton. Not a single dollar went to our daughter. That omission was not an oversight. That was a decision Robert had made deliberately and revisited many times over the years. And when Patricia read those words in the lawyer's office, she arrived at the only explanation she found acceptable. Her mother must be mentally incompetent. How else, in her mind, could a woman she'd always seen as a simple housewife end up controlling a fortune of that size? She retained attorneys and filed a petition with the court. The paperwork accused me of forging Robert's signature on his will, of manipulating a gravely ill man in his final weeks, of exploiting a vulnerable dying husband for financial gain. The documents portrayed me as a calculating interloper who had deceived her way into an inheritance. I remember sitting at my kitchen table with a mug of coffee going cold beside me, reading through the legal filings she had sent. My own daughter was suing me for fraud and elder abuse. She was petitioning the court to have me declared mentally unfit, to overturn the will her father had spent years carefully updating, and to redirect everything to herself. The particular irony was this: Patricia had always seen me as simply Mom, the woman who folded her laundry, attended her recitals, and kept the household running seamlessly while her father worked. It had never occurred to her to ask about my life before I became her mother. She had never noticed the law books in my study. She had never wondered why sitting judges occasionally sent me holiday cards. During our deposition, Patricia's attorney, a silver-hunged elder law specialist named James Morrison, spoke to me with the deliberate slowness people sometimes use with the very young or the very old, as though volume and clarity were required in equal measure. "Mrs. Hamilton," he said, setting down his pen with practiced patience, "could you explain to the court how a woman with no legal training, no business background, and no post-secondary education came to possess such intimate familiarity with Mr. Hamilton's business and financial operations?" I smiled at him with all the warmth of a grandmother offering tea. I told him I had always had a head for numbers. I let him believe whatever he chose to believe. Sitting in that courtroom now, watching Patricia's composed, almost triumphant expression, I almost felt a pang of something for what was coming. My daughter believed she had prepared thoroughly. She had no idea that her supposedly simple housewife of a mother had been reading legal briefs since well before Patricia was born. The bailiff brought the room to order, and Judge Margaret Walsh entered. The moment her eyes found me across the courtroom, I noticed the almost imperceptible hesitation in her step. A flicker of recognition crossed her face before she composed herself. Patricia, absorbed in whispering with Morrison about the ease of the case before them, noticed nothing at all. What Robert knew, but I am getting ahead of myself. The real story didn't begin the morning we walked into that courtroom. It began at the end, the day I sat at Robert's bedside and held his hand as he left this world, the same hand I had been holding in one way or another for 35 years. The doctors had estimated 6 months. Robert made it 3. There is no amount of wealth or careful planning that can negotiate with cancer. In those last hours, his voice had dropped to something barely above a breath. "Dorothy," he whispered, "they're going to come for you. They believe you don't understand anything, but I've made sure you'll be protected. Everything is yours, just as we agreed." I pressed my lips to his forehead and told him I would be fine. He knew me more completely than anyone ever had, more completely, it turned out, than our own daughter. The will was read 2 weeks later in the office of Robert's attorney. Patricia arrived in a black dress with a packet of tissues, giving a performance of quiet grief that would have moved anyone who didn't know her well. Michael stood at her shoulder, already running figures in his head. The lawyer's voice was measured and neutral as he read the key passage. To his beloved wife, Dorothy Hamilton, Robert left his entire estate, all properties, investments, bank accounts, and business interests valued at approximately $62 million. The silence that followed was the kind that has weight. Patricia's packet of tissues tumbled to the floor. "That's impossible," she said. Her voice was barely steady. "Daddy promised me the Martha's Vineyard house. He told me I'd receive the business." The lawyer continued without expression. Her father had left Patricia a framed family photograph and his wristwatch. To Michael, he had left his golf clubs. I watched my daughter's face move through grief, confusion, and finally a hardening fury within the space of perhaps 10 seconds. "This isn't right. Mom has no idea how to manage money. She'll lose everything within a year." Michael's voice carried a sharper edge. "We need to examine those documents. There has to be an error somewhere." There was no error. Robert had been refining that will for years, adjusting it each time Patricia revealed another layer of who she had chosen to become. The borrowed $20,000 for a kitchen renovation that was never repaid. The evening at Michael's promotion dinner when she referred to my cooking as peasant food. In front of his colleagues, loud enough for several of them to hear, Robert watched how they treated me. He saw, with quiet clarity, how they had come to regard me as incapable, as unworthy of genuine consideration. After we left the lawyer's office, Patricia and Michael followed me home and sat down in the same living room where I had helped her through homework assignments and adolescent heartbreaks for years. "Mom, be reasonable," she said, her voice softened now into something almost tender. "You simply can't manage an estate of this complexity on your own. Why not let Michael step in and assist? He's excellent with finances." Michael nodded with enthusiasm. "We could establish a trust, make sure everything is structured properly. You wouldn't need to think about any of it." I poured my tea without hurrying. "I appreciate your concern. I'm perfectly capable of managing my own affairs." Patricia's composure slipped a fraction. "Mom, you have never balanced a checkbook in your life. Daddy handled all of it." In that moment, I understood precisely what they were actually proposing. And I began preparing accordingly. The legal papers were delivered on a Tuesday morning by a young man who looked genuinely uncomfortable serving documents to a grandmother. Patricia had moved quickly. The petition, which I read while my coffee went from hot to cold to room temperature, alleged that I was suffering from dementia, that unnamed parties had manipulated me into forging my husband's will, and that I represented a danger to myself through a pattern of irrational financial behavior. The evidence they had assembled was, in its own creative way, almost admirable. They had located receipts from an occasion the previous year when I had become disoriented driving to Patricia's house, clearly a sign of cognitive deterioration, rather than the straightforward consequence of unfamiliar roads blocked by construction. They had documented what they called my inability to operate modern technology. Based on the afternoon, I had asked Patricia's teenage daughter to help me configure Netflix. The most damaging piece of evidence was a sworn statement from Michael, asserting that I had become increasingly paranoid and secretive about Robert's estate, refusing their patient and, intentioned guidance. My phone rang within an hour of receiving the papers. "Patricia, Mom, I'm so sorry you had to find out this way." She did not sound sorry at all. "We tried to reach you calmly and reasonably, but you simply aren't in a position to carry this kind of responsibility." "I see," I said. "The good news," she continued, "is that once the court establishes your incompetence, Michael and I can take proper care of everything. You'd receive a comfortable allowance, more than enough for your daily needs. And you wouldn't have to concern yourself with the complicated investment decisions." I watched a cardinal settle on my garden feeder, remembering how Robert always said cardinals brought fortune with them. And where would I be living in this arrangement? A small pause. The Martha's Vineyard cottage would be ideal for you. It's manageable in size, easy to maintain. We'd take the main residence, naturally, given our family obligations. Of course they would. "Patricia," I said carefully, "do you genuinely believe I am mentally incompetent?" "Mom, it isn't about belief. It's about reality. You married Daddy at 25 and never built a career. You have no background in business, law, or financial management. This level of inheritance is simply beyond what someone with your experience could be expected to handle. As though 3 decades of marriage and raising a child had stripped away everything I had been before." "I notice you've retained James Morrison," I said. She caught herself, "You see, that right there, that suspicious, paranoid thinking, is exactly what concerns us." After the call ended, I sat for a long while in Robert's study, surrounded by his books and awards. On his desk, a photograph from our wedding day. Me in my simple white dress. Robert looking at me as though I held the only answers worth knowing. He had known this moment would come. He had tried to prepare me. I opened the bottom drawer and removed the envelope he had pressed into my hands 2 years before he died. "When they come for you, and they will come, open this." Inside was a business card and a single note in his handwriting. "Dorothy, call Margaret Walsh. She remembers you. Margaret Walsh, Superior Court Judge." The name hovered at the edge of memory. I set the card on the desk and sat with it for a long while, uncertain yet what it meant, unable to imagine what was waiting on the other side of that phone call. Before the legal proceedings began in earnest, I decided to try once more with my daughter directly. Perhaps face to face, without lawyers between us, I could make her understand what she was doing to our family. Their house reflected the life they had decided they deserved, sleek, contemporary, striking in the way that expensive things sometimes are when chosen purely for effect. Patricia had redecorated again since Robert's funeral. New furniture, fresh art on every wall, all of it, I noted, purchased on credit, extended by people who could afford to absorb the debt. "Mom, what a surprise," Patricia said at the door. Her tone communicated otherwise. Michael was out. That suited me. This conversation needed to happen between the two of us alone. I accepted the coffee she offered more out of lifelong habit than any desire for it. "Patricia, we need to discuss this lawsuit." "There's nothing to discuss. You're unwell, Mom. Even if you can't recognize it, this action is being taken for your benefit." "I'm not unwell, sweetheart. I'm grieving. I'm adapting to an enormous change, but I am not incompetent." She sat across from me with an expression mixing pity and frustration in equal proportion. "Yesterday, you called me to ask how to transfer funds between accounts. Last week, you couldn't pay a bill online. These aren't simply the ordinary inconveniences of getting older." I studied her face, Robert's strong jaw, my own green eyes staring back at me from somewhere she had never examined. "What if I told you I was pretending?" She blinked, Pretending to do what? Pretending to struggle, asking for help with things I understand completely. Uncertainty crossed her features before she pushed it aside. Mom, that makes no sense. Why on earth would you do that? Because people behave differently around someone they believe is weak. I said, they say things, reveal things they would never share with someone they considered a genuine equal. Patricia's laugh was quick and dismissive. A threat? You, Mom, you are 65 years old. You have been out of the workforce for 30 years. In what conceivable sense are you a threat to anyone? I set down my cup, smoothed my skirt, and stood. The kind you're about to find out about. What is that supposed to mean? I paused at their front door, one hand resting on the brass handle. Robert had specifically commented on the day we helped them purchase this house. It means, Patricia, that you and Michael have made a very serious miscalculation about who you are dealing with. Now you're frightening me. This is exactly the kind of irrational behavior that... I turned back once. I love you, Patricia. I always have and I always will. But I will not allow you or anyone else to strip away what your father spent his entire life building. I drove home with a feeling I had not experienced in years. Not sorrow, not dread, anticipation. Patricia believed she was hunting something small and defenseless. She was about to discover she had cornered something else entirely. That evening, I made the call. The number from Margaret Walsh's business card rang twice before a professional voice answered. Judge Walsh's chambers. This is Dorothy Hamilton. I'd like to speak with Margaret regarding a case that's been assigned to her court. A pause. Dorothy Hamilton, as in Dorothy Mitchell Hamilton. Yes, a longer pause, and then the voice returned. Please hold. Then a different voice, familiar even after all the years between us. Dorothy, my God, is it really you? Judge Margaret Walsh had been Margaret O'Brien when we were law students together at Harvard. We had studied in the same carols, competed in the same moots, graduated in the same class in the spring of 1982. She believes I'm a helpless elderly woman who stumbled into a fortune. I told her. She has absolutely no idea who I used to be. Margaret's laugh hadn't changed at all. Dorothy the Destroyer Mitchell, incompetent, that is genuinely funny. Do you remember the Hartwell matter? You took apart 3 expert witnesses in a single afternoon. I remembered. It had been the pinnacle of my career, before Robert, before Patricia, before I chose to step away from practice entirely and become simply Mom. Margaret, I have to ask you something honestly. Given our shared history, can you ethically preside over this case? We were colleagues, not close friends, and decades have passed. But Dorothy, if you're planning what I think you're planning, I'm planning nothing except defending myself against false accusations. With representation, I hope. I looked across the room at Robert's photograph on the mantel. I'll be representing myself. A long silence,